The courthouse rose out of the city like a monument carved from fatigue. Its walls were pale, streaked with dust, its windows narrow and reluctant to let in light. Inside, the air was thick, heavy with the smell of old paper and sweat. Ceiling fans spun lazily, slicing the heat into uneven currents. Footsteps echoed endlessly, swallowed by the building's cavernous throat. On this morning, two strangers entered through separate doors. They did not know each other, yet their lives had been carved by silence, their bodies marked by endurance. The courthouse would hold them both, if only for a day, if only for a verdict. 2. Rukmini's past. The house at the end of the lane had always looked empty from the outside. Inside, it held a lifetime of fear. Rukmini had walked those corridors for years, her bare feet brushing against cold tiles, her body moving lightly as though the air itself might punish her for being too loud. She had married at 21. The wedding photograph still hung on the walls, her hair threaded with gold, her smile frozen, laughter captured as if eternal. But those smiles belonged to another life. The cameras had not captured the shouting, the slaps, the slammed doors. At first, cruelty was subtle, words disguised as advice, sharp and cutting. Gradually, words became actions. A push, a slap, a lock on a door, bruises hidden beneath sleeves, scarves, jewelry. The house learned her patterns. Every sound became a risk. When she became pregnant, she hoped for change. But the house remained unchanged. One night, he came home drunk, accusing her of imagined crimes. He pushed her against the wall. Later, she lay on the cold floor, blood pooling beneath her. At the hospital, the miscarriage was recorded as accidental. No one asked questions. Years followed in silence. She stopped crying, stopped pleading, stopped resisting. Her stillness became a shield, but it also angered him. Violence escalated. Each act left a scar, each day carved into her body and mind. One morning, she decided. She packed nothing. She stepped out into the street barefoot, past curious neighbors who did not stop her. She walked until her feet blistered, until the city swallowed her, until she found a shelter. The shelter was small, crowded, filled with women whose eyes reflected pain and endurance. When she looked at her hands, the bangles that had once clung tightly now hung loose, slipping against her thinning wrists. Her body itself had become the record of what silence had taken away. She cut her hair short. She allowed herself to breathe. 3. Arjun's past. The house learned his footsteps before it learned his voice. Every evening he returned at the same time, the latch turning gently, never rushed, never demanding. The door always closed carefully behind him, as though Evenwood might be startled by sudden sound. Neha sat on the sofa, her back toward him, the light of her phone washing her face blue. She did not look up. He stood there for a moment anyway. Waiting had become instinct, came naturally now, like breathing quietly in a room where sound felt dangerous. In the early days of marriage, he had believed love meant adjustment. He believed patience proved sincerity. He believed silence could fix what words could not. Those beliefs aged slowly, decaying without noise, appearing intact long after they had already died. Her words were never loud. They arrived softly, almost politely, but each one landed sharp. Comparisons came often. Other men, stronger men, men who spoke more, earned more, commanded more. He tried to become those men. He changed the way he spoke. He straightened his posture. He worked longer hours. But gentleness does not disappear simply because it is unwanted. At night, lying beside her, he stared at the ceiling while her back faced him like a closed door. Desire turned into embarrassment. Want became something he felt ashamed of. Eventually he learned stillness, breathing lightly, pretending sleep, letting thoughts circle endlessly without escape. The first time she struck him, the sound was not loud. What stayed with him was not pain, but confusion. He did nothing. His hands did not rise. His voice did not harden. He only looked at her, trying to understand what rule he had broken. After that, fear settled into his body. His chest tightened without warning. His heartbeat began to respond to her footsteps. Her mood decided the shape of each day. Slowly, he disappeared. First his opinions, then his boundaries, and finally his sense of self. She had grown up modestly, yet after marriage she reached for a life far beyond what she had known. Clothes, outings, appearances, everything had to reflect status. For her, he was not a partner but a source. A means to maintain a version of life she wanted others to see. Every demand sounded reasonable. Every expense felt justified. He worked until exhaustion, yet the more he provided, the less he seemed to exist. His shoulders had begun to slope, as though the weight of each day pressed them lower. Even his clothes seemed to hang differently now, loose where they had once fit, as if his body itself had learned to shrink beneath expectation. He carried shame quietly. In the outside world, a man's silence was often mistaken for weakness. To speak of fear was to invite ridicule. To admit pain was to surrender dignity. So he endured without explanation. He smiled when required. He laughed when expected. And each public smile erased a little more of him in private. When he finally walked into the courthouse, he did so without anger. The building stood tall, pale and cracked, heavy with the weight of endings. He climbed the steps slowly, documents pressed against his chest, breathing carefully. Not because he was afraid of the verdict, but because he was afraid of feeling nothing at all. 4. The courtroom battles. The courtroom became a theater of endurance. The judge presided with weary eyes, accustomed to lives unraveling in slow detail. His fingers rested often on the gavel, as though weighing not just law but the exhaustion of human lives. His gaze lingered on each witness longer than necessary, searching for cracks in their voices. Lawyers moved like actors rehearsed in precision, their tones sharpened by years of practice, slicing through the air like blades honed on repetition. Papers rustled like whispers of judgment. The fans above turned lazily, stirring the heavy silence. Rukmini's case unfolded first. Her presence was steady, her body stripped of ornaments, her silence transformed into defiance. Witnesses confirmed what the walls of her old house had long echoed. Neighbors recalling glimpses of fear, doctors recording injuries, a police officer admitting dismissal of her complaint. At one point, her hand trembled slightly as she adjusted her sari, the only visible fracture in her composure. The defense attempted to dismantle her story, painting her as a provocateur, twisting her silence into rebellion. Yet her stillness remained unshaken. She sought only release. The verdict dissolved her marriage, leaving her unbound, carrying nothing but her life. Later, the same courtroom absorbed Arjun's story. His lawyer spoke of erosion, of a man diminished by words sharper than knives, of footsteps that dictated his heartbeat, of silence that erased him piece by piece. Witnesses described a fading man, colleagues noting withdrawn smiles, neighbors recalling muffled arguments, friends remembering laughter that had vanished. At one point, his throat tightened, a breath caught halfway, almost breaking into sound before he forced it back down. The defense portrayed him as inadequate, exaggerating grievances, a man too weak to command respect. Yet the truth lay in his endurance. The verdict divided assets, calculated obligations, measured freedom in signatures and alimony. He walked out burdened yet released. 5. The corridor. The corridor outside the courtroom stretched long and dim, its walls lined with benches worn by decades of waiting. The air carried the weight of countless verdicts, each step echoing into silence. Rukmini emerged first. Her wrists were bare, her hair cropped short, her body carrying nothing but freedom. She had refused compensation, refused property, refused the weight of material settlement. She carried only herself, unclaimed and unbreakable. Arjun followed minutes later. His hands clutched papers heavy with obligations, his freedom measured in ink and signatures. He walked slowly, each step deliberate, burdened yet breathing freely for the first time in years. Their paths crossed briefly. Two strangers, two survivors, two sides of silence. Their eyes met, not in recognition but in acknowledgement. In that moment, the courthouse became more than stone and dust. It became the stage where endurance had been spoken aloud, where silence had been broken. They walked on in opposite directions. The courthouse loomed behind them, its walls heavy with stories, its corridors echoing with silence. Outside, the city roared, vendors calling, buses honking, children shouting. Ordinary life continued, indifferent to the battles fought within those walls. Rukmini walked into the world unbound. Arjun walked into the world burdened yet alive. Two strangers, two survivors, two sides of the coin, and in walking away, each reclaimed a fragment of themselves.